Greetings fellow members of the Esoteric Order of Gamers. Today I'm going to tell you all about a game I've been playing and raving about for a while now. It is, of course, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood of Venice by Triton Noir. It's a spectacular, huge, heavy box full of goodies, and I really enjoy this game. In fact, at the end of last year I said this was my favourite of 2021. And I played it more than any other game last year, and I'm still playing and enjoying it now, working my way through the huge campaign. So let's talk about Assassin's Creed Brotherhood of Venice. Let me show you what's in the box. We'll have a look at the painted miniatures. I'll also show you how to make some very cool 3D buildings you can use for the game. So we're going to get right into it. So settle back, relax, and enjoy Assassin's Creed Brotherhood of Venice. Now, this game had a very successful Kickstarter campaign. It had about 6,700 backers. It raised something in the region of 1.39 million Canadian dollars. It did very well, and it was delivered last year. Not only do you get this big core set, but there are also a number of expansions as well. I've got 2 of them, and there's another one as well. And there were extra bits and bobs as well. The first thing that strikes you about the Assassin's Creed box is the quality of the thing. It's thick cardboard, this lovely matte finish with the logo on the side, and you've got the Assassin's Creed logo in gloss varnish on the front with a pattern in the background. It's a really lovely design. It looks fantastic on the shelf. And it's chock-a-block. There are so many miniatures and stuff in here. Now, it's just been announced that Triton Noir are going to do a retail version of this game. It won't have all the miniatures in it, because this must have cost a fortune to produce and could only be supported by a crowdfunding kind of system. The retail version, however, will have standees in it, so you still get the same game. I don't know what they're doing with the campaign system and all the envelopes. I'll tell you all about that in a moment. But anyway, it is available for non-Kickstarter backers, which is great because this is a good game. So what you get inside of the box are a whole lot of tiles. Of course, it's set in Venice, in Renaissance Venice. I can't remember which of the Assassin's Creed games was set in Renaissance Venice. Was it the third one? I don't know. I've played almost all of them except for, I've only got halfway through the last one. It's getting diminishing returns for me personally in the Assassin's Creed video games. They're sort of doing the same thing over and over, and also the load times are getting really long. Have you noticed? I don't know. But I always really enjoyed them in the past, and the Assassin's Creed Venice one was especially good. So this is all that theme, and you really do feel like you're playing the video game, though it's much more interesting than a video game, because board games are more interesting than video games. I'm just going to say that. I think that they are. Anyway, lovely illustrated tiles in several types of sizes. You get some large ones like this with towers on them, because of course you'll be jumping from towers. There's even some bigger ones like this. That one's, look at that, it's a ship. Lovely. We get some interior pieces. There's a double-sided board here, which is your headquarters. You can have 2 different types of headquarters for your assassins. Lots of rooftop tiles, courtyards, the whole bit. All great artwork. So good quality, thick tiles with great artwork. You have the rule book, of course. The campaign book. So all this is the campaign of the game. Lots in there. You get 4-player boards. The game is for 4 players in the core set. And then the rest in here, most of it is miniatures. Look at all that. Heaps and heaps of them. I haven't quite finished painting all of them, but I've done a lot of them. So you can see a few mounted figures there I haven't painted yet. But there's, what have we got? 3 trays, and then the bottom tray is this big one. Down here you can see I've got some cards, dice, and a whole lot of envelopes, because this is kind of a legacy campaign as well. You go through the different episodes of the campaign, and each time you start a new game, you open up a new envelope. But I'll tell you all about that. For now, let's set up a game, and I'll show you how it plays. Now, before I get started, of course, there is an Esoteric Order of Gamers rules summary and reference available for this game. Yes, I've done this, put it all together. Now, here's a reference sheet as well. Now, I should point out that because you go through a series of games in a campaign in this game, there are some tutorial videos at the start of that campaign. Now, I'm usually not a fan of tutorial scenarios. They're usually very simple, and I feel like you just read through the rules and play. But in this case, they work really, really well. They lead you through the concepts of the game very, very quickly, but they also, it's part of the story and part of the whole thematic element that you learn things as you go along. So start from the start in this case. It's really well introduced. So, for example, and this is very slight spoilers for the whole for the game, but when you start, you're just beginning assassins, and eventually you get yourself a headquarters. So you're not starting right at the start of the game with all the mechanics to do with the headquarters, which are things that you upkeep between your games of the campaign. It gets introduced as you go along, and then you get your headquarters board like this, and you get to choose your allies and all that kind of thing. So I really like the way it's done here. It feels like it's part of the story. It's very organic, and it just flows along really nicely. So a very, very clever system. Again, that gets all into the envelopes and everything, which we'll get into in a moment. The other thing they've done here with the rulebook design is that they've divided each piece of rules, each chunk of rules, into a section with a number. And that number actually is on a lot of the components, especially when you're just starting off in the campaign. So it's very easy to access a rule as you go along. So in my summary, of course, I put all the rules into one thing. Everything you need to know is on here. But if you play it from the start of the campaign, which I highly recommend you do, you will be eased into it really, really well. So beautifully done, the whole campaign system and the way you learn the game bit by bit, and the way it also refers to the design of the rule book. It's really, really cleverly done. The other thing I should immediately point out is that these 3D buildings I'm showing you here are not part of the set. I built them myself. When we first started playing this game, we just had little bowls underneath the roof tiles just to raise them up a bit and give a sense of 3 dimensions to the whole thing. And then I enjoyed the game so much that I went to the trouble of finding these files online. Somebody else had done these files and repurposed them for the sake of Assassin's Creed. I found those files and I mounted them onto foam core and made all these 3D buildings that I can put my tiles on. At the end of this video, I'll show you how I did that so you can do it yourself. You can either make them with foam core like this, which are very sturdy and they're great, but the only disadvantage is that they don't fit back in the box. The other way of doing it is to just make them on cardboard with an interior supporter. You can take that supporter out and then just fold them down and put them in the box, which is a clever way of doing it as well. But it really improves the look of the game. It does make it a little bit harder to sort of look over and see what's happening on the other side of the board, but I think it's worth it for just the visual impact that it has. The Kickstarter campaign, you could get a tower model, which was pretty spectacular. I didn't get one of those, but I've made my own couple of towers. I've got 2 of them, because sometimes you'll have 2 in a game. And that just sits on top of the board where the tower illustration is on the board and gives a nice bit of height to the whole thing. So let's talk about the gameplay. And the basic gameplay is the same throughout. You just get things added as you go through the campaign, and things get a bit more complex and a bit more interesting, especially the bit in between the games where you do various bits of upkeep and you heal your assassins and do things like that. Now, the basic system is based on Triton Noir's other game, V-Commandos, which is a fantastic game. I highly recommend you grab it if you can. It's World War II stealth commandos missions. And the original game is all counters. It also uses tiles like this. And of course, it's the same kind of system. Works really well. And the basic idea is that you're undergoing stealth missions, which then eventually the alarm goes off. And most of the time when the alarm goes off, the enemies increase highly in number and there's combat and you try to escape and stuff like that. So the theme fits perfectly with Assassin's Creed. It really does just feel seamless. I think this is the perfect system for Assassin's Creed. So V-Commandos is great. They just did a Kickstarter a while back where they've re-released the game with miniatures this time. So it's going to be on a production level as of Assassin's Creed, the same kind of amazing level with all the miniatures and everything, which I'm really looking forward to playing. But I think Assassin's Creed is even better than V-Commandos. It really does some things that elevate it to a higher level, which we'll talk about as I go through the rules. So basically what you do in a game is you start the round with drawing an event card. Another great thing is as you go through the campaign, more event cards get added to this deck, so it gets larger and larger and there are more options. Now that event card might change the rules in some way for the turn, so they can have quite an impact on the game. Then you have the assassin phase, and then the assassins in this phase can do various actions And like Conan, if you know the game Conan, you can do them in any order. So you have a number of action cubes here, and you don't have to say, okay, it's all my go first and your go next, and there's no turn order. You can do them in any order you want to. You can just spend an action cube and do an action, which is great and keeps everything flowing and dynamic. And you can never even spend an action to get an extra cube, which you can save for a later turn, or you can use it during the enemy phase. So if the enemy come into your tile, you can use your extra cube to attack them as a reaction. So that's a really nice mechanic. So what actions can your assassin do? Well, they can move to a nearby square. Nearby in this case means any tile that is, or square that is orthogonally adjacent. So up, down, left, right. They can trade with other assassins in the same square, giving and taking equipment cards. They can complete an objective. These are the objective spots here, and you can see they have counters on them. Depending on how many cubes are on them, if they spend that number of cubes, they can take that objective. They take the counter and they get the victory points on the other side of it. They can use a fast travel station. If there are a number of these fast travel stations on the board, you can move between them. These are also used for entering and exiting the board. You can use a weapon, a ranged weapon or a melee weapon. You can hide and search bodies. If you kill some of the enemies, their bodies stay on the board, and then you have to spend another action to search them if you want to for equipment cards, and then hide them to take them off the tile and put them back into the pool of enemies. And you can also equip, which means when you get those cards from searching bodies, you can equip them to your board in various different ways. And as I said, you can save one of these action tokens for a later turn or the enemy's turn. So there's a wide amount of stuff you can do. You can also do things like climb up to the top of the tower. You can spend an action to scan the board when you're at the top of the tower and perhaps find chests of goodies and other exit points from the board, things like that. There's so much variety. Other stuff is introduced as you go through the campaign. Next up, you've got the enemy phase, and that starts with drawing one of these enemy cards. You have a number of cards that are based on the number of assassins playing, and there's a alarm side where the alarm is off and where the alarm is on. So depending on whether the alarm is off and on, which is this counter here, that is how many enemies come onto the board. And you see you've got A, B, C and D. They are the different entrance points on the board, which are different depending on the scenario, and you choose the number of figures noted on here, whether they're crossbowmen or swordsmen or whatever. Take those from the pool and place them onto the board. Now the number of enemies you have is very important, because if you run out of enemies, if they're all on the board and you want to put a new one and you can't place it, that means you've lost. So you have to be very careful. You can't just let the enemies build up to huge amounts and keep evading them, because eventually you'll run out of them and lose the game. Once the enemy's on the board, of course, they can move. They will move into nearby spaces if they have red bases in them. Now, red bases are little bases that are left behind by exposed assassins. I'll get to that in a moment, but that's where they move. If there aren't any of those to move to, they will move in the direction indicated by the event card that was drawn that turn, either north, south, east, or west. And of course, if assassins are on the board and exposed, I'll tell you the difference between incognito and exposed in a moment, but if they're exposed, the enemies will attack them either with long range or melee, depending where they are. So let's get on to incognito and exposed, because it's the entire linchpin of the game. You start the game incognito, so when they come on the board, they're sneaking around and they're hidden from the enemy. Now, if you move into a tile with other enemies, you have to make a stealth roll to see if those enemies see you. What you do is perform a detection test with these red dice. You roll as many of these red dice as there are enemies in the space that you're moving into. And you roll these up. If you get a blank, you're very lucky you haven't been seen and you stay incognito. If you get an eye symbol, you become exposed and the alert state immediately goes to red. The alarm is going off, everyone's alerted. The proverbial you-know-what is going to hit the proverbial rotary device. If you get the alarm symbol with the eye on it, this means the assassin is only exposed if the alarm is already going off. So it's a real push your luck mechanism. Are you going to take the risk? Now there are different weapons. Some of them, if you use them, are going to set off the alarm. If you whip out your rapier and start cutting into people, they're all going to be alerted and the alarm is going to go off. However, if you attack them with a hidden blade from a hiding spot, like a haystack or something like that, you can kill them and the alarm won't go off. So you have to choose the times that you attack and the weapons that you use very carefully, because you're trying to avoid that alarm going off for as long as possible. As soon as the alarm goes off, everything is going to go crazy. The amount of enemies that come on the board when you draw one of these cards is going to increase markedly. It's going to be a lot harder to fulfill your mission objectives. There are ways to turn off the alarm, but they're very few and far between, so you really want to put off that tipping point of the game as long as possible. Of course, things will eventually come down to combat. When an assassin attacks, it rolls a number of dice depending on the weapon it's using. These white dice, these are hits. These ones activate special abilities, and these ones mean that the enemy retaliates, so they get to attack back. When they attack, they use black dice, and they either hit on one of these, or a shield result means you don't get hit. So it's a very straightforward, simple and fun combat system. I feel like I've hardly scratched the surface of this game because there is so much to explore. That is the basic rules system, but there's heaps and heaps of extra stuff. Now, the great thing about this game, and I talked about this briefly in my first video about Assassin's Creed, are the envelopes and the whole system of going through the campaign. You have a heap of these envelopes, and as you go through the game, you're going to be opening these up in true spy legacy fashion, and you bring out extra cards. There might be extra event cards, special rewards if you fulfill the objective, all kinds of stuff. The other thing is, as you go through the game, your character can level up. You get more points, experience points. You keep track of those points. In the back of the book here, there's a diary of memories, and you can also get stickers which you can place in the book if you achieve certain special objectives. They don't change the game whatsoever, but you get cool stickers you can put in your book and give you a sense of achievement. And at first when I read that, I went, ha! Who wants those stickers? That's ridiculous. Of course, as I started playing, I was desperate to get those stickers and put them in. They're called 100% sync, if you know the video game, and it's really good to achieve those as well. And sometimes when you're playing a game, you'll have achieved your main objective, but you'll just want to push it that little bit further. Just push your luck and try and get that 100% sync. And sometimes it can succeed, and other times the whole thing can fall apart like a deck of cards because you just pushed it too far. And this works so well in the terms of the game. It is a lot of fun, and just adds that bit of push your luck to the whole thing. It's great stuff. So you have this wonderful sense of progression as you're going through and opening the envelopes and going from game to game. And really, we've got a long way to go. I've played quite a few games of this now, but there's still heaps to go. And then we've got expansions as well. So heaps of playability. One thing I will say about this system is that you do need to be an organized person. You don't want to be someone who is very chaotic and just throws it all back into the box. You've got to keep track of your cards, what you have from session to session. We usually take photographs of our setup. We carefully put things in different bags, etc. You do have to be super organized, otherwise you lose track of things. You can, after you've finished the entire campaign, reset everything back into its original envelopes and start again if you want to. That's a long way down the track for us, but you can obviously do that. But as I said, you've got to be organized because there's a lot of moving parts here, especially as you go on further through the campaign. Now, I mentioned there's a part between the games where you do some upkeep, and that's where you use your headquarters board here. And you can assign different allies and figures to this board to do various things between the games. So you can heal assassins that have been injured in there. You can choose blueprints and have people try and build the blueprints to get special items. You can fulfill certain objectives, so you can level up your headquarters. You can also get more equipment cards that you can then share out to your assassins at the start of each mission. So there's a heap going on there as well. It adds another whole new dimension to the game. It's a little bit nitpicky. You have to kind of go through the process. It's very easy with my summary. You just go through the process. It's not something you can sort of remember because there's quite a few steps to it, but it only happens, you know, at the end of each game or at the start of each game. And if you just go through it step by step, it's easy. And it does add a whole new dimension. It's not just game after game. There's this whole kind of maintenance phase in between, which is all about leveling up your characters, leveling up your headquarters, giving yourself more abilities, making the game more interesting. So why is Assassin's Creed Brotherhood of Venice so good? Well, let me show you a little bit of footage that I filmed. It was probably about 4 games into the campaign, and we were so excited about the game that I had to just film a little bit of footage. And this footage, I think, shows you how cinematic things can be, because all these events happen, and there's the stealth side that then gets to the action side. Anyway, just watch this and see what you think. I'm sure you can see the enthusiasm that comes across from both of us as we're enjoying a game of Assassin's Creed. So we're set up for a game here. Dylan and I are playing. Hi, Dylan.
Hello.
And we are absolutely loving this game, and I just thought I'd show you a little bit of an example of play. This is a bit of a spoiler, but you don't know which mission this is. But we started over here, and we came into this a little bit too fast, a bit too bold, ran across here to go for this objective that was here, got into a fight, had some bad luck, and then had to escape. We were all exposed in that square. The guards were rushing in. And at that point, we had to split up. So, what's her name? Daria came up here into the tower. She ran up into there. One of us went there. A couple went into here. Claudio went into a hiding spot. I had Bastiano here, who was still exposed out here. And all these guards came pouring out, as you can see, and surrounding the whole area. We're freaking out. And then at this point, I realised, of course, I had my parachute, so Bastiano got his parachute and flew over here from that rooftop to this rooftop and went into that hiding place, leaving his exposed marker here. So he's safe in that hiding space, which is great. And then Claudio murdered the other guard with his hidden blade, so he's safe in the hiding spot. Daria is on the tower. She synchronized and searched the area around and found a chest over here and another crucial entrance point or exit point, which is absolutely crucial. And the guards are trying to find us. The alarm is on. It's all happening.
It's all go.
This is a pretty amazing game, isn't it?
It's fantastic, yeah.
There is so much that can happen in a few turns, and you can find yourself going from stealth, trying to get the objectives, to sudden chaos as the guards have found you and are alerted, and then you're running all over the place trying to escape and get the alarm off again. It's just an amazing game, and it's so cinematic. You really feel like you're caught up in this adventure, and everybody is using their abilities to try and survive. So there's just a little taste of what just a few turns of Assassin's Creed Brotherhood of Venice can be like.
It's pretty epic.
It's pretty epic. Got to say, Daria has been hiding in the rooftop garden the entire game, just picking off guards as they came in, but he was trapped because guards were here and he couldn't get out. And then eventually, after waiting several turns picking off guards, the guards moved over to the other side of the town square, and the way is clear for him to run down to this haystack and hide in there instead. He is the consummate assassin. Now, I haven't even mentioned the fantastic miniatures. They're really, really nice miniatures. Great to paint up. It makes the whole, the table presence of this game is spectacular, especially if you go to the trouble of making these 3D buildings. The only thing is you've got to be a little bit dedicated. So for example, the crossbowmen, there's a lot of these figures and you're going to be painting, they're all the same. Well, there's 2 different designs for the crossbowmen. So you're going to be doing a lot of repetitive painting. But once you've done the crossbowmen and maybe the swordsmen, some of the other ones like that, the individual character figures are easy to paint. Unfortunately, some of the individual character figures you might only use once in one of the scenarios, so it's kind of funny painting those up just for one scenario, but again, you want to go to the trouble because it just looks so fantastic. There are also some special boxes in the box here, little boxes like this with little individual miniatures in them, which you'll expose. This is a funny kind of system. I've seen this in another game because, of course, it kind of says, okay, when you get to this game, you bring out this miniature, but of course, you want to check it out beforehand because you want to paint it. You want it ready and painted when you actually play that game. So anyway, it's a nice little thing to have the individual boxes. There's something about this sort of tactile nature of the whole game that's fantastic. The envelopes, the boxes, just the miniatures. It's just something that has presence and it has lots of things to do. And all this would probably fail if the game system itself wasn't really strong, but it is. So it all works together as just an entire thematic game system. Well, before I wrap this up, let me show you how I made these 3D buildings. We'll just go through that process in case you're interested in making these for yourself. So I've got my artwork and I've glued it just with white glue to these strips of foam core, and I'll cut these 4 walls with a craft knife. Now the artwork on these buildings, I'm not going to make the links available because of copyright reasons. I'm not really sure what the copyright situation is, but I'm sure you can hunt them down if you look yourself. Now I just chop out a 5mm piece at the end of each one of these, and I'm careful not to cut through the artwork itself. I'm just cutting through the foam core here, and then you can see that I just carefully cut out that little chunk, and that gives me a little edge that I can stick the corners together quite cleanly. You can see they go together, and this way the edge is nice and clean, the corner is nice and clean. Using white glue in there and then putting it together, and then I'll reinforce this join with some pins. Just put some pins in there. You can leave these pins in after it's dried or take them out, whichever you prefer. I think I've just left them in just to make them a little bit stronger. Now again, you can find this artwork online, but I just won't put links to it in case there's any problems with it. I'm just using this for personal use, of course, just for my own stuff. So it's not up to me to share those links. So after I've attached all those, I've got my nice square building, as you can see. The thing is to do a few of these in different heights, so you get some variety in height. Then I'm going to just blackline the edges with a black marker, just run over the edges of the artwork. You don't have to do this, but it just makes it a little bit neater. And you can do that just on the edges where they join together as well. And there you have it. That's the basic building. You can see here's the tile. I've put a black edge on the tile itself as well with the black marker. And that just sits on the top. It's slightly larger, the tile, than the building, just to give it a feeling of reality there. But you don't want it too much larger, because when you put them next to each other, of course, you don't want the tiles sticking out too much. But you can see with the different heights here, you get a nice variety in the townscape, and it looks nice and realistic. For the tower itself, I made up some artwork from this, from bits and bobs I found on the internet. An illustration that I found, which I just cut down to size. Same kind of thing, except with this one it's got a flat roof. So I put a piece in the top here, glued it carefully into place, made sure that was sitting flush with the edge, just turned it upside down and made sure it was pressed down flat. And then I have a piece of artwork which is actually just a scan of the original Assassin's Creed board, and pop that on the top. And there you've got a nice tower to give some lovely height to the board. It sits on the tile there in the middle and covers the original artwork. And here's a selection of different heights and different styles. And this really brings the whole thing to life. It gives it a lot of 3D feel to Assassin's Creed. Well, that's it, folks. A quick overview of Assassin's Creed. Well, not quick, but it's not incredibly comprehensive. There's so much more to this game than I've touched on here, but I hope I've given you an idea of how much I enjoy it and how good I think it is. As I said, it's my game of last year. I'm still playing it a lot now. I really look forward to what Triton Noir does in the future. I think they do some very cool stuff. It'll be interesting to see if they do further things based on this system or something completely different. I don't know, but there's an obvious very, very high level of dedication and craft to making this game, from the miniatures to the artwork to all the little details. The design is lovely, the graphic design is lovely. So a few typos and things, but these things happen. And I've got to say, I'm just highly, highly impressed by it. I absolutely love it. So how can I rave about this anymore? I've got 2 expansions over there, Creed vs. Crows, which is a 1 versus 1 type of game, and Tokyo 21, which is a modern take on the system, because there's some modern elements to the video game, and they've used that as well. There's another one called Roma, I believe. So much content will keep me going forever. And I think I'll be playing this for a long, long time. I think it's an absolute winner. Thanks very much for watching. This is the Esoteric Order of Gamers as well. I'm Peter, also known as Universal Head. Hit all notifications and subscribe, and the bell button, hit, the drill. And check out my website at orderofgamers.com. I've recently posted my 400th rule summary and reference sheet. There's days and days of work in every single one of them, and I think you'll find them extremely useful for all your games. Thanks again. Good gaming, everybody. Stay safe, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.